Hello and welcome to Rogue Artisans and Crafters. Our show is about featuring local artists and craftspeople from within Southern Oregon. We talk to our featured artists about how they came to their art, what drives them as artists, find out stories behind their art process, and how their work as artists influences their lives. Today we have the privilege of featuring local landscape photographer Tim Hallam. I found Tim and his work whilst looking for local artists to feature on this show during my online searches. I found Tim's photography site and was immediately impressed with his work of landscape photography. I'm pleased to be able to introduce Tim and his work to our audience. And Tim, welcome to the show.
All right, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I was when I found your site online several weeks ago, and kind of got the impression that of not only impressed by the quality of your landscape work, but got the impression that you seemed like a young up-and-coming photographer. And having met you just recently at one of the local art shows, was further impressed by your youthfulness and yet the quality and talent that you're expressing in your work. And so I'm really happy to be able to bring you onto the show and talk about what you do and how you got started.
Sure. Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. And I do shows mostly here in Ashland at the Lithia Artisans Market,
Right.
where I meet all kinds of people. And one thing I get all the time, people come in and they go, "Oh, are you the artist?" I say, "Yeah." And they go, "Oh, this isn't your dad's work?"
Yeah, right.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Not my dad's work.
Yeah.
This is mine, and I'll be 27 this week.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I am young, but I'm plenty old enough where I've had the chance to put some time into my photography.
And it definitely shows in the quality of the images that we feature here and that we'll talk about during the show.
Yeah, thanks.
So, so basically, my understanding from your website, you started when you were about 15,
Right, correct.
and so when you got, how did you come about getting started? What was I imagine you got like a camera as a gift, or you got?
Yeah, So I mean, it's kind of like that. As long as I can remember, I've been interested in photography, and I was born and raised in Mount Shasta City,
Right.
so I was literally born between a mountain and a mountain.
Yeah, right.
And
yeah.
my whole life, I saw amazing displays of
Yeah.
light, so it was just easy from an early age to have an interest in documenting
Right.
this beauty.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was 15 when a professional photographer moved into the neighborhood, Michael Legellick, that I really started to see the potential in photography, because he was a printmaker.
Right. Okay.
And that captivated me right away to see these scenes that you see and capture and be able to turn them into a print that someone can have in their home and display. And so I bought my first professional camera used from him, and my first tripod used from him. And he kind of mentored me and started taking me on trips to Death Valley and the Oregon coast and Yosemite and all these places. And I got to work with him just on kind of a neighborly friendship basis. And so from then on, it's been my main focus, landscape and nature.
Well, that's a great thing to be able to get mentored by a professional and kind of learn mistakes to avoid and kind of learn the best ways of kind of doing things correctly. And,
right, absolutely.
And that certainly helps to speed up the development process as an artist.
Sure.
So, and it definitely, again, I say it reflects in the quality of your work. So,
Well, thank you.
What beyond the landscape work, are there other photography subjects that you pursue, or is the landscape kind of like exclusively your thing?
Well, I don't like to limit myself by saying exclusively, because if someone says, "Hey, I really got this thing coming up, I need someone to shoot it," I can do it.
Right.
I'm well versed.
Yeah.
But my passion in photography is nature and landscape.
Yeah.
So
And what equipment are you currently using now for your work?
for the last 2 years, I've been shooting with a Canon 7D Mark II,
Okay.
which is a 20 megapixel digital camera.
Yeah, I shoot with the original 7D myself.
Sure, it's very similar to
Yeah.
what I'm using. I have 3 lenses. I have a 10 to 22 millimeters, so it's almost a fisheye,
Right.
which I shoot a lot of my images with, and then a 50 millimeter and a 70 to 200.
Right.
And I find that most of my prints I actually make with my 50 millimeter lens. And I use that lens for doing a lot of panorama work.
Right. Okay. And in doing your panorama work, are you using like a panoramic head on your tripod to get that all done?
You know, I used to have one on a tripod, and I used to take all the time in the world to set it up and count degrees and make sure everything was perfect. And then Photoshop got so good that as long as you overlap each image by a fairly generous amount, maybe 1/3 or so, you don't need any of that stuff. So my whole kit for my my gear, my photo kit, it's as light as possible, and I have not had any trouble just using a regular tripod for panoramas. As long as you make that overlap of each image, things work out fine. But I know what you're talking about. I started using those, but I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've often have looked at getting something like that into my own kit, but at the same time, I've also learned that same very technique that you've talked about, in overlapping the images. And so it's like, why make that investment when, you know?
Sure. I mean, it's a great tool, and that's certainly the right way to do it. But, I mean, is it really right or wrong when it comes together in a print? Like this one here is a 6-frame panorama, shot without any of that fancy alignment stuff, and it blends fine.
Yeah, and that's, with the sophistication and continual improvement of like Adobe software tools. That kind of makes things just a little bit easier.
Absolutely.
Once you've got the familiarity with the software.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is a continually ongoing thing with Adobe. So, there are in the process of doing your images, are you doing a lot of do you do a lot of post editing of like the coloration? Or are you using like filters in your equipment or is it all kind of, are you keeping to like just the natural scene?
I get that question a lot, and it's kind of touchy because this is modern day digital photography.
Yes, that's right.
And a lot of people ask me at shows, is this photoshopped? And the truthful answer is yes. Everything is photoshopped because it is impossible to shoot digital photography without opening it in Photoshop.
Yeah, that's right.
But what people mean when they ask that is, was this sky really there? Is that tree real? Is that leaf there in that image? And the answer to that is yes. For me, landscape and nature photography is completely about being there, present in those conditions and documenting it. And if you didn't have those conditions, I'm going home empty-handed. And I'm going to come back over and over and over again until I get them.
In the traditional, back in the film days, photographers that were doing landscape would make use of like physical coloration filters that they had put on their lenses to enhance the sky colors or to do things to kind of make the coloration image just more vibrant.
And now, I used to use neutral density filters and grad NDs, as they're called, which will darken the sky so I can have a bright foreground, which is kind of a traditional way to present a landscape photo. And I've actually moved away from that, and I do that digitally in post-processing in Photoshop. But still, that's in that gray zone because it's not really something false. I'm just blending multiple exposures to portray how the scene really looked in person. And so it's the same thing as using a glass filter, a neutral density filter, except for you're doing it through a different method. And in addition to that, I do use a circular polarizer quite a bit, which helps cut down glare and darken skies and things like that.
It's there's a fine line that has to be achieved as a photographer trying to capture an image, a scene in an artistic manner, and making it reflective of the environment. But not overreaching the coloration in the scene. Trying to just make it the best that it can be.
Absolutely.
So because it's because certainly you can take like the technique of like HDR style images where everything just kind of gets like really freakish in appearance at times.
Oversaturated, muddy shadows. Just some people like that, and that stuff. Some of it does sell. For me, everything has to look as true as it did when I was there. And so I do not often, but occasionally I will use an HDR technique. But I will process that HDR, high dynamic range image into something that the average person is going to look at and not go, ooh, that's an HDR.
Yeah, right.
They're going to see it and go, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But technically it is an HDR.
Yeah. Yeah. But as long as I think, we all have to kind of reach a definition for ourselves in terms of how we are wanting to capture that documented scene.
Right.
Yeah. And I liked how you really capture that quality without going to the extreme, and just making it really kind of an outstanding scenic beauty.
Yeah. Well.
Even with your truck example, that is it's a funky scene, but it's a really cool, beautiful night moment. That.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that, because that's exactly what I strive for in my photography, is just having that.
I'm kind of jealous, actually, because that's the kind of scene that I would be wanting to find for my glamour fashion work.
Yeah.
So in my case, that image would have one or more hot models posing around the truck.
Sure. Sure.
But that's, because that's the kind of thing I would be going for, to just make something totally different, fashion oriented.
Certainly be a great spot for it.
Yeah. So we've got some images of your work that the control room can begin to kind of load up, and we'll talk about some of the images that of your work. Now, where is this particular here?
This is at Crater Lake.
Yeah.
Not too far from the lodge, and on this particular morning, the surface of the lake had begun to freeze. And Crater Lake, which is kind of an interesting fact, I didn't realize this until recently, but it actually almost never freezes solid.
Yeah.
And there's some geothermal reasons for that and the depth. But on this particular day, it was so cold that surface started to ice over.
Oh, wow.
And I was up there at sunrise, so all that gold coloration in the ice and water is a reflection of the sky looking down into the lake.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go to the next image. Wow. Now that's a really beautiful mountain scene.
This is a panorama, a 6-frame panorama with the 50 millimeter, like I was talking about.
Yeah.
I actually shot this earlier this week.
Oh, okay.
So this is brand new, just west of Talent.
Oh, okay.
Not far at all.
Yeah.
And I'd driven up out of the fog, as we've been fogged in this week. And you can almost always get above it if you just drive a short distance into the hills.
Right.
So I drove up there, and the light wasn't coming out, but I saw there was a window on the horizon in the clouds where the sun would surely come through. So I set up, had all my settings ready, and sure enough, the sun came through that opening. All that fog, just for about 20 seconds, lit up gold. And this is an example where we had just been talking about using one of those ball heads on a tripod with all the degrees.
Right.
If I took the time to do that, I never would have gotten this shot.
Yeah.
But using Photoshop, I was able to take 6 vertical images, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, overlap each one generously, and then the computer software stitches it.
Yeah.
And even though that fog is moving and everything, it's completely seamless. You would never be able to detect that there's multiple images making that up.
Yeah. Well, that's just a beautiful, gorgeous scene. So that's really cool.
Oh, thank you.
So let's go on to the next image.
Tokatee Falls, Oregon.
Yeah.
So that's just about 2 hours north. And there's an observation platform here. There's a trail from the parking area. It's maybe a couple hundred yards, quarter mile at the most. And it takes you to this observation platform that's fenced in, and that's where most everybody takes their Tokatee Falls picture from.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to go down the cliff, which I am in the wintertime, and you can get down here to the water, you get this view. Yeah. And it's completely different than looking at it from afar.
Yeah, right, because typically I've seen numerous pictures of that fall, and it's always an upper downward view.
Right.
And I've often wondered if that's like the only place from which to shoot, because once you change out of that location, the whole scene's got to change.
Yeah,
and, and it's a fall that I've always wanted to make a trip to, but I've yet to talk to anyone that's actually been there. So. Yeah, that's a beautiful scene.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so let's go on to the next scene. Okay, now that makes me think of like Utah.
Sure. It's not. I have this is one of my largest pieces printed at my show, and most people walk by, they go, oh, I've been there, that's Arches National Park.
Yeah, right.
They're completely wrong. This is California.
Okay.
And most people do not think of anything like this in California.
Yeah.
This is in Lone Pine, which is right near Mount Whitney, And that mountain frame to the opening is Lone Pine Peak.
Okay.
And the name of this arch is Mobius Arch.
Okay.
I shot this about a month ago, and I took this about 30 minutes before sunrise.
Okay.
And it's also with that 50 millimeter lens.
Wow. All right. That's a beautiful scene.
Thank you.
All right. So let's go to the next image. Okay.
It's Ashland Creek right here in town at Lithia Park this fall.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to the next.
Yeah, this was a really cool one. Grouse Gap, which is behind Mount Ashland. It's known for the cross-country skiing in the wintertime.
Oh, okay.
And I had gone up there 3 consecutive days, and there wasn't a trace of snow anywhere around. But the aspen leaves were fantastic without the snow.
Yeah.
So I kept going up there and shooting it. And then that 4th day, I heard that it had snowed up there. And aspen leaves are very delicate, and they're sensitive to temperature, and they drop right away. But I knew how full they were the day before because I'd been returning to the same area, like I had mentioned, going back looking for those conditions. So I drove my Toyota Corolla up there in the snow onto the dirt road and got out, went down, and you can't see it, but I'm actually underneath the eaves of a tree. And I had to wait for a break in the blizzard where I could get a clear enough shot at these aspens. And again, this is a 5-frame panorama.
Yeah, okay.
And I got that shot, and within probably 6 hours, every leaf was gone.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so let's go on to the next.
Yeah, this is one of my most popular images. That's Lassen Volcanic National Park, Northern California.
All right. Yeah,
it's
just
beautiful. Starting to snow.
Yeah. All right, so let's go on to the next.
Oh, yeah. Capitol Reef, Utah.
Yeah.
Capitol Reef is a fantastic national park in Utah. It's kind of off the beaten path. So most people, when you think Utah, you think arches, like that arch.
Yeah.
What's the other one out there? Canyonlands and arches and Moab area. This is kind of in between Moab and Bryce Canyon, and it's called Capitol Reef because in the 1800s, Mormon pioneers looked at this impenetrable barrier of rock like a reef, the Capitol Reef. And now there's a national park out there that's off the beaten path, so not many people visit it.
Right.
And for me as a photographer, that's great.
Yeah.
There's
you
no
want,
lines
you
of
always
people.
want someplace. You want to go someplace different that's kind of rare.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, because you're the first one I've ever. This is the first time I've heard about this particular location.
Sure.
And I've read numerous, the other major locations in Utah. So this is kind of cool to learn about this place.
It's spectacular. That tree is about 75 feet tall. It's a cottonwood.
Yeah.
And those cliffs behind it, they're hundreds of feet. You just go to the sky.
Wow. Okay, so let's go on to the next.
Yeah. Utah again. That is Dead Horse Point State Park in Utah, which is right near the entrance of Canyonlands.
All right, so let's go on to the next. Wow.
Yeah, it's a spring thunderstorm at Mount Shasta. Shooting lightning is by far one of my favorite things.
Now, in capturing lightning, I know that there's like a lightning trigger kinds of devices.
Right.
And are you using something like that to capture that?
You know what? I own a lightning trigger.
Yeah.
I have not used it once for capturing
lightning.
lightning.
Okay.
It does. I bought it specifically because it's a lightning trigger, and it works so well that when you have your camera hooked up to it, that when a lightning bolt happens, that thing can trigger your camera so fast that you don't even have to touch it.
Yeah.
I'm not an electronic genius, and I don't trust it. So what I do, my technique for capturing lightning is I set my camera up on a tripod, pick my composition, and I do have a remote, a wireless shutter release.
Right.
So once I have the camera set up, I have that trigger in my finger, and I stand back 20 feet, and I just watch the sky.
Yeah. And
if I see any flicker out of the corner of my eye, I don't care if it's behind me 180 degrees, if I have any indication that there's going to be a lightning strike, I hit the camera.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, this is a 30-second exposure.
Oh, okay.
So once I see that flicker, I'm working with a 30-second window that I might capture a bolt.
Right.
And that's how I capture all my lightning bolts.
Wow, okay, cool.
And someday I'll use that lightning trigger.
Yeah, okay. So let's go on to the next image.
Any guesses where that is?
I can't even imagine. It's, but I love the scenic view. I mean, it's just.
This is one of those images that people glance at who walk by my show and they go, "Oh, I've been there. That's the Alvord Desert." It's not the Alvord Desert. This is just a few miles from here. That's Immigrant Lake.
Oh, wow.
And in the low water season, the lake bottom silt cracks. And Immigrant Lake is probably the most under-photographed location anywhere around here because everybody goes, "Oh, it's a mud hole or whatever." But tell you what, it's a good mud hole.
Yeah, cool. That's beautiful. Yeah. So let's go on to the next.
Yeah, that's one of my personal favorites. That's Indian paintbrush in the foreground, sage, and then lupin. That's in northern Siskiyou County off Highway 97.
Okay, all right. Yeah, let's go on to the next.
Same location. That's lupin out there. This is a sunset. The other one was pre-dawn.
Yeah, okay. And let's go on to the next. Wow, now I like that.
Yeah, thanks. This is probably one of my most popular, maybe my absolute most popular images I have, and I almost didn't shoot it. It was completely on accident that I ended up with this. But I was in Wisconsin at a place called Copper Falls State Park last year. I was there photographing fall color.
Yeah.
And I don't look for abstract stuff. I don't shoot abstract. I was trying to shoot the whole scene with my wide angle like I typically would. And I was there too late in the day. It was too bright. There weren't any clouds. I was kind of frustrated at that point because I'm thousands of miles from home trying to capture fall color, and I got to the place too late. And then I realized that right at my feet, I could see a reflection of the tree in the river. So I put that 50 millimeter lens on. That's a half-second exposure. And what we're looking at is the yellow fall foliage from the tree on the other side of the river reflected in the water and the blue sky.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, let's go on to the next. Wow.
It's Fort Klamath, not far from here. That was this last summer, and I won't tell anybody that I missed the shot, but I was actually photographing lightning.
Okay.
And I neglected to capture it, but I ended up with a rainbow and a summer storm, so I was still very happy with it.
All right, so let's go on to the next.
Yeah, this is another one of my personal favorites of Shasta. In the foreground here, that is the summit of Mount Ashland here in Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And Mount Shasta is 70 miles to the south. Yeah. And this was a late September day, totally clear air. Yeah. And I was up there at sunrise, and the light on the foreground rocks, that's probably the first 30 seconds of light.
Yeah, okay. Let's go on to the next.
That's Harris Beach, Oregon, and Brookings. That was a spring storm.
Yeah, okay, and on to the next.
That's Immigrant Lake again, just right outside of town here.
Wow, okay. Now, one of the things that you just mentioned before we started the show actually was the fact that one of the things that you're doing is creating your own custom frames too. The fact that this frame that you have with your image of Crater Lake is a frame that you created yourself.
Right,
So,
yep, absolutely. And I'm not really positive what sparked that, other than my whole life I've liked making things, whether it's metal, welding, or woodwork. And custom frames are insanely expensive. So for many years I've had to crop all my photos to standard ratios where I could find ready-made frames, because I can afford ready-made frames. I can't afford custom frames. But then I thought, well, what the heck, I should try making some. So just a few months ago, I started making some really rough frames out of reclaimed wood, barnwood kind of stuff that doesn't require a lot of tooling. And then I immediately started stepping it up, and I bought a table saw and I bought a miter saw. And this is one of my early frames, and it's made from blue pine, which is around here we have a lot of trees that are infected with a bark beetle disease, and when they die, they're left with this coloration inside. And the wood isn't used for building homes because its tensile strength is probably some minute percentage less than a regular tree. So it's basically garbage, but it is one of the most beautiful woods that I've ever seen. And to be able to make picture frames out of it in custom sizes, and then tailor the frames to specific images through stains and processes like that is very fulfilling to complete an image.
Yeah, well, it definitely adds a unique additional character to your work.
Well, thanks.
For buyers of your work that are, to be able to know that not only is the print an incredible image, but that you're able to create a unique matching kind of a frame to go with that.
And people really like one of a kind. And even if I try to make that exact same frame, it will not be the same.
So now, if someone wants to contact you to purchase your work, how do they go about getting a hold of you?
Just through my website, hallamphoto.com. And on there I have a contact page where they can email me, and my phone number's on there also.
And is your work exhibited currently at various galleries?
Not at any galleries. I belong to the Lithia Artisans Market.
Okay.
So 9 months out of the year I'm showing outdoors in downtown Ashland. And that's basically it. But I'm hoping to get into some local galleries.
And what's the general price range of your prints in terms, for someone that wants to get examples of your work?
This is a 12 by 18 matted print right up front here on this easel. I sell those for $55.
Oh, okay.
And they're G-clay quality archival prints.
All right.
So that's kind of my lower end spectrum. And then a piece like this with the handmade frame goes for $610.
All right. Okay. Cool. Well, Tim, I appreciate you coming on to the show and to talk about your work. And so that concludes our show tonight. And we've reached the end of our show for Rogue Artisans and Crafters. And we thank you at home for joining us and learning about our featured artist, Tim Hallam. I'd like to thank Tim for being our featured artist and appearing on our show to discuss his life and work. We also want to thank our crew who have made it possible to put this program together, and to thank RVTV for their wonderful studio facility, which allows us to produce shows such as ours. If you'd like to become a studio producer and create your own public access show, you can contact RVTV to learn how. And please make sure and check out Tim Hallam's website, where you can get more information about his wonderful landscape photography. So I'm your host, David Glamour Dave Nienow, and we will see you next time. So good night. All right.